There are countless people here on YouTube that will give you 1,000 different tips and strategies or methods to Bible study and get a lot out of your Bible. And I think you should watch all of the videos, do all of the research. Like we say here at How to Faith a Life, be a Bible study nerd. But today I'm going to talk about 4 different Bible study approaches or Bible study methods that we see today over and over and over again in different forms and different monsters, and the one way that you should take. Let's begin. I was scrolling Instagram today and there is a counselor that I follow on Instagram because she said some really wise things before. But let me tell you, she is not a Christian. So she will occasionally say things that I 100% disagree with. But I keep following her because every once in a while what she says really hits home and God can still speak through her, share his wisdom through her, even though she's not a believer. Her Instagram is Hey Tiffany Rowe. And again, not a Christian. I'm not endorsing everything that she says or posts, but I do find some things that she posts here, they give me a better way of viewing the world. It helps me understand how non-believers understand the world. And it helps me in evangelism. It helps me in understanding how to reach people who are closed off to the faith. Let me say this. It is important to be aware of how the world views Christianity. It is important to be aware of how the world views the Bible. And if we're always in our Christian circles, if we're always in our Christian bubble that excludes the lies from the world, we're gonna be really disassociated when it comes to reaching the world. And so there's that fine line. You guys have probably heard the catchphrase, be in the world, but not of it. Now, where am I going with this? Of these 4 Bible study methods that I'm gonna talk about today, 3 of them are really kind of shaped by the world. And this is oftentimes what you're gonna come in contact with, maybe new believers or people that are closed off to the faith. And so it's important to know that it exists and why it's not the approach we take to Bible study. The first Bible study method that honestly a lot of people do, and the first time I'm gonna say it, you might be like, what? What's wrong with that? Is the devotional approach. Now, don't get me wrong. The word devotional, I will use that when I'm referring to my Bible studies or my time with the Lord. But in its core, a devotional or the devotional approach to Bible studying basically just asks, what does this text say to me here and now? And this is really, really common to new believers or people that are kind of stepping into the faith. But what's really, really problematic about that is, let me grab my Bible. We're gonna open up to a random spot. First verse I see. Rachel is weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children because they are no more. Okay, so what does that mean for me today? Yeah, I weep for my kids because they're probably fighting their nap right now and it makes me really mad. No, that's not what this passage means. That's not what I'm supposed to get from this verse. Oh, it's talking about the Lord will turn mourning to joy. And I don't know much more about the context. I could pull out a commentary and look it up, but that's not what we're doing today. The point is, I'm not supposed to read a single verse and say, what does this mean to me today? That is the devotional approach. That's Bible study method number 1, and we're not gonna do that, okay? It's a fine approach when you're starting out, but once you learn that you're not supposed to do it, don't keep doing it, okay? Because that's a really quick way to get to heresy. The next Bible study method is the literature approach. Now, depending on what sect of Christianity you're in, you might hear a lot about this or you might hear none of this. I've come from a bunch of different denominations, a bunch of different backgrounds, and so I've seen this done a bunch of different ways. But some Christians tend to forget that the Bible is literature. So there's poems, there's history, which serve different purposes all throughout the Bible. And I've made a bunch of different videos about that. I will have that linked at the end of my video. But then other Christians tend to only view the Bible as literature. And that means when there comes a verse that they don't want to hear, they'll say, oh, well, it's just literature of the first century. It doesn't apply at all to me today. It's just a poem. And we don't want to do that. The Bible has to have meaning for me today, or there's no reason to studying it really, truly, honestly. So I would encourage you on that spectrum of not acknowledging that there's literary elements in the Bible and over accepting that it's just a literary book. I would want you to fall somewhere in the middle. Always make sure that you're aware of the type of literature that you're reading, whether it's wisdom literature or a historical narrative, but do not boil it down to just being literature. And then there's the theological Bible study method. This is the method that boils the Bible down just to doctrine, just to basically morality, if we're going to get really honest. It's those who want to take away the historical reliability of the Bible and say, well, it's not about Jesus being an actual man who actually died on the cross. It's about, am I a good person that loves other people? And while being a good person that loves other people is so important, that's not the only message that we're to get from the Bible. The Bible has to hold historical weight for it to have any theological impact on my life. This approach will often also ignore the context of like a parable or a statement that's made in the Bible. It will just purely look at it as a theological statement. And you really need to pay attention, like I said previously, to the literature of it. Is this a parable that Jesus is telling? If you look at the different gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they will differ a lot of the time in the stories that they tell. Like for example, we just looked at Matthew 9, the woman washing Jesus's feet with her tears. I forget which gospels say what, but one gospel names her as Mary. I think that's Luke. Then Matthew doesn't name her. Then, oh, I'm getting all mixed up. But the point is they all tell a different portion of the story. If I was to look at them just through this theological approach, I would say, well, all of that history doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if she actually washed his feet twice or once, or if it was Mary or not. All that matters is we need to have this same kind of surrender. And while that is true, it is super important that she did physically anoint his feet, because that is part of the sacrificial system. That is part of Jesus being the lamb. The final Bible study method is the historical critical approach. And some non-believers use this approach when they want to critique the faith. But this is how I've been taught in seminary to study the Bible, faithful to the literary, faithful to the historical, faithful to the theological, because the Bible is grounded in a point in time. Because the Bible does hold relevance in our lives today. 2,000 years later. So you might be like, Faith, where do I begin on this Bible study method? Well, you begin with the first century audience, but let's say you're a bullet journaler. This would be a really great method to take if you're Bible studying. Now, this requires some background information, understanding the first century culture. And I have made a series of 3 videos on that. I will have that also linked at the end of this video. But 2 study Bibles that are really helpful to get that background information right there in the moment. I would definitely recommend the Cultural Background Study Bible. I got this at a discount. I will try and find a good price for you guys. And then the Archaeological Study Bible occasionally has really good first century. This is the one I have, but there's a lot of different ones. This is the New International Archaeology Study Bible. And they both will have good notes, but I especially like the Cultural Background Study Bible. And then of course, a Bible dictionary. Having a good Bible dictionary, you can look up a location, a type of person, a nationality, whatever, and get a lot of good first century information on it. So you want to have that first century response. Then, kind of honestly related, is the author's intent. You want to ask yourself, why is Paul writing this? What is he intending to do here? And study Bibles often will give you that as a hinter, but you want to make sure that you don't miss, why was this actually written down? And then at that point, you can ask yourself, what is the basic theology of this teaching? Like, what is the basic doctrine? What is the basic idea that applies to all believers for all time? And then finally, you can have an application for today in 2021 or whatever year you're watching this in. And I always encourage you guys to have timeless application, but if you're doing it in like a Bible study journal here, you could do like, today, this is my application for today, dealing with my 2 toddlers that drive me insane. So with this historical critical approach, what you're doing is you're acknowledging the historical part of it, and then you're also critically asking yourself, what is the theology? What is the doctrine? Where is the application? Both those components are equally important. Now, the weaknesses to this approach is that the authors were human and we are human. So Paul, for example, is a first century Jew, and then we are 21st century Christians in whatever country we live in. You may speak English, or you might have multiple languages that you speak. You have a context or a worldview. But understanding that is the first step to kind of like transcend those boundaries. But of course, we don't stop being sinners. We don't stop having our faults or our limits in our worldview. And that's why it's so important to go to church, to read other people from different denominations, to study as much as you can, just consume, become a Bible geek. Because serious study of the Bible, if it doesn't lead us to our knees, lead us in further worship and dependence on the Lord, then it's not faithful biblical study of the word. Now, if you guys would like to learn more about the cultural background in Jesus' day, like I talked about earlier, check out this video here. Or if you would like to learn more about the literary elements in scripture, check out this video here, and I will see you guys in these videos. Bye guys.